Dr. Lugo.
Good evening, Mr. President, members of the Governing Board and Cabinet. Thank you for having me here. And be careful, all of you administrators out there, what you say, because eventually somebody will remember you. Where's that badge? I hope I said it in a friendlier voice. Nope. It's my apologies.
You were doing your job.
I think you didn't recognize me. But it was okay.
Now I'm all embarrassed. Hey, that's me. Well, this evening we're here to talk about establishing an advisory committee for the governing board for Meet and Confer. That it comes about every year, about this time of year, where we discuss wages, salaries, benefits, and conditions of work that do not have an instructional impact, but it also has a systemic impact for the district. So the advisory committee basically is for the governing board to establish, and should they want an advisory committee in different areas. You have right now a retention advisory committee. Last year you had an evaluation advisory committee. So the Meet and Confer advisory committee really follows policy HC, and I will talk about that in the next slide. And an advisory committee is a temporary committee that has a specific start date and an end date, and comes up with recommendations for the governing board. So I just kind of wanted to share with you some of the things that are in policy with regards to that is, letting you know when the reports will be due to the governing board, updates on when the board will terminate the committee, and any kind of facility needs that are there. So this is policy HC, which governs over the Meet and Confer. And I'm good. Excuse me, but I'm going to read it to you. I think I already memorized it. So the scope of Meet and Confer shall include wages, salary schedules, hours of work, compensation, fringe benefits, and conditions of work that are non-instructional in nature and have a district-wide impact. So the proposed dates for Meet and Confer right now are in February and March. The reason why even though our budget isn't finalized, the reason why we'd like to meet during this time is we want to make sure that recommendations that come to the governing board are timely enough so that you have time to discuss those recommendations prior to us getting contracts out for the next year, so that all employees understand, the direction of the district as it pertains to their conditions of work and salaries and benefits. So the committee representation, we have administrators on the committee, classroom teachers, supports teachers. We have classified staff, both who are on the district sites, such as sometimes an office manager, ESP employee, and support classified staff. Oftentimes, transportation is represented in those areas. So the needs are pretty much non-issues for the governing board. We have the facilities, we have the clerical support, we have certified and classified represented at the table, and we do look to have a facilitator, Cheryl Anderson. She has facilitated for the last 4 years the committee. I think she's well respected by everybody on the Meet and Confer team, and has done a nice job in the last couple of years. So, with that, are there any questions?
Questions, governing board members? If not, does anyone want to make a motion?
I move the governing board approve establishing an advisory committee to provide input relating to the scope of Meet and Confer as defined in policy HC.
Is there a second?
I second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item 10A is approved.
Thank you.
Congratulations. And now 11A, business and plant, review of the quarterly budget report for fiscal year 12-13. Mr. Walmer.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the governing board and cabinet. Do you have these backup materials for this report on the board docs as an attachment?
I see it now.
This report is required by governing board policy. It's informational only, and it's an update of the progress of the budget through the first 6 months of the year. So I'll go over a little bit, since we have new members, about how to read this report, make a comment on some of the different funds, and entertain any questions that you may have. So we have here our levy funds and our state and federal grants, and the leftmost column in each case is the current legal budget. Next is the year-to-date expenditures, money we have actually spent in the form of checks that have gone out in the mail, etc. Next is the percentage of the budget that has been spent. Encumbrance is either money we know we're going to pay in salaries or the total of all purchase orders that we have outstanding, so monies that we have committed to different vendors. Budget balance then is the money that remains uncommitted. That's purchase orders that we could get right, monies that we could further commit. And lastly, the percentage of the budget that is left available. So typically there's nothing profound or conclusions that you would draw from this, other than if we were over the budget would obviously signal a problem, but typically at this point of the year most of our monies are committed. 90% of our budget goes out in salaries and benefits, so most of our budget is committed basically from the first day of the year. So our M&O budget, what's a little different this year? In the past, we've had a budget for the following year that had a series of reductions because our M&O budget has declined in each of the last several years. We've gotten to the end of the year and our results have exceeded our expectation capacity-wise, and so we've had the opportunity to not implement some of the reductions that we had planned on for sort of a worst-case scenario. I don't really expect that to be the case this year. The budget's very tight. I expect that we're going to use just about everything that we have on the table to spend, and that's going to be it. As far as the budget for next year, what is known so far, the pluses and minuses, changes for next year are a little bit short of a wash. Not a tremendous amount of money, but we do have 100 additional students this year, and that's on the plus side. On the bottom, on the negative side, we have an increase in our state retirement contribution and a couple of other things that come out just to a small negative. The linchpin to our budget conversation this year may well be our health insurance cost for next year. That committee has met one time, and by the time Meet and Confer begins, we should know what our obligation for that will be. And that, as far as I know, is our single biggest transaction with a vendor. So it's the budget impact of health insurance costs is very significant, and it has increased steeply in the past years. So that'll become known very shortly. The other variable is whatever the state does in this legislative session. Governor's budget is supposed to be out on January 18th, so that'll clarify her priorities, and from there it'll clarify day by day as the state meets. So that's our M&O budget situation. Page 2 is classroom site fund dollars. Those are funded by a 0.6% sales tax. At the top, Fund 11 base pay, and at the bottom, Fund 13 classroom site fund options. All of those monies go directly into the teacher salary schedule. Since that is based on a sales tax, as you know, those have declined in recent years and have now begun to rebound, so that's actually a positive. Fund 12 is what funds teacher pay for performance, and as that increases, so will the amounts that teachers will get each November that they have earned in the prior year in the form of pay for performance. So this will be the first year that'll be the case. The next page is our two capital outlay funds. These are funded per student by the state, and this is where the great majority of our cuts have come, apart from the M&O reductions from our declining enrollment. These two funds have declined greatly in the amount that we get per student. These fund technology, both hardware and all of our software subscriptions, educational and non-educational, that run our district, everything from payroll to some of our interventions. All use some kind of software, furniture and equipment, and building improvement. So building improvement has been taken care of with our bond program, but we don't have a lot left, and my suspicion is that if we don't get some kind of relief there, if they don't restore some of the funding that they've taken away in the following year, 14-15, we'll have some very difficult decisions to make. We have been hearing from state legislators that this is an area that they're looking to bring back some of the funding in. They're not, I've not heard any conversations about increasing M&O funding, but we have heard some about capital, and that would make sense because that's where they took it from to begin with. Special revenue, instructional improvement, that's also known as Indian gaming. That funds, half of that money funds teacher compensation, and the other half funds things such as dropout prevention programs. The last page is our federal and state projects, Title I and IDEA, the special ed grant, etc. And on the state side, at the bottom of the page, the school safety program, that's what funds the SROs. That's been reduced greatly in recent years, and that's why we're down from 8 schools to 5. Yeah. So those get those federal projects, those get approved throughout the year. So as the at the 9-month report, 3 months from now, there will be more grants on there, and they seem to kind of come online one at a time as they get approved. So that's fairly typical for this time of year. One thing that needs to be mentioned, if we enter the sequestration situation that we hear so much about, this page would be impacted. Some of these funds could be reduced or withheld immediately, and so that's something we have to watch very carefully. These are the funds that support some of the infrastructure that have gotten the student achievement returns that we've gotten, so it's fairly critical to our operation. With that, I'll take any questions or clarify anything you'd like me to.
Can you give some examples of the use of dropout prevention monies and what we may have funded?
With Indian gaming?
Yeah, Indian gaming.
We support our after-school sports programs, and we pay a portion of the salary of our assistant principals who serve that function. We also fund from there the professional development days, the extra days that teachers have on their contract, and this will be the last year that we're able to do that. So that's one of the negative line items in the M&O budget, is we'll have to find other funding for that.
Are there any other questions? If not, thank you, Mr. Walmer.
Thank you very much.
Move along to item 12A, which is approving the governing board representation, having to do with the Arizona School Boards Association. And there are 2 positions in here, the legislative liaison and the Arizona Arizona School Boards Association Network Representative. The policy BJ states that the board will participate in legislative programs through conferences with the state and national school board associations. Anyone have?
So, Tiffany has been appointed by the ASBA's president to represent us and others in this congressional district at FRN, and I think that experience and the commitment that is required throughout the year, something that I did several years ago, makes her the perfect Arizona School Boards Network representative to represent Creighton. So I nominate Tiffany for that role.
Ms. Arenas, are you willing to accept that role?
Yes, I'd be happy to do that again. And just so everyone knows, FRN is Federal Relations Network, and we'll be going in 3 weeks to DC to attend the national conference with school board members from across the nation and learn about issues Congress is addressing more in depth, and then lobby our Arizona delegation on that Tuesday. So we'll be addressing sequestration and hopefully making a good impact in our Arizona delegation.
Okay. And then do we have anyone interested in being the legislative liaison?
So, I know, Matt, in the past that we've that you've been that designee, but I'm not really sure what that really means.
I don't either.
And I think about it actually, because I know other districts, and maybe it's not called a legislative liaison, but they hire someone, and it's usually a lobbyist, and they're like the legislative liaison for the board. I know it's not something we have the funds for, and if that's what we think of as a legislative liaison, I think we should really consider who it is. I know I don't have time to go down there. I know you are down there, but you also represent another, your employer. So, I don't know. So I think we should talk first what we expect of the legislative liaison.
Well, I think it's been really helpful to know what's happening at the legislature and what decisions they're making are affecting our district and the community that we serve. So I really appreciated all the legislative updates and how we've made that a permanent part of our agenda.
Yeah. We don't need to have a designee for that though, because we can keep that and like whoever gets that information. I mean, I guess it's been convenient to just, hey Matt, what's going on?
It would be nice if we could provide our elected officials with, especially the state legislature, because I think sometimes they're disconnected, with how what the decisions they're making affect us. But I don't know that one person necessarily needs to do that, or if we could just be more aware of it as a board.
I mean, the reason why we discussed in the past having a permanent place for legislative and then / political, because we realized a lot of things we wanted to talk about extended beyond the legislation, maybe it was the governor or courts, judicial, whatever, was so that if it was an opportunity for the board to stay aware of what was going on, and then identify if there were opportunities that the board wanted to take as an entity. Because otherwise we're perfectly entitled to do anything we want as individuals, but to represent the board required collective a conversation about it in public. So I think that's a separate issue in terms of like the legislative report and placeholder.
Can I ask, is that something that we are required by our policies to have a legislative?
No, I think it's just something that's always in there,
So
but it's not really right now. So I mean, you could definitely eliminate that and just do the ASBA network representative.
Okay.
yeah, I mean, I'll just reference the policy here. It's PJ. And this is what it says. It's just 2 sentences. The board will participate in legislative programs through conferences with the state and national school boards associations. We are, I think, well aware of that. And then the second line is the board authorizes the superintendent, Dr. Boyle, to actively participate in the development of legislation that has a positive effect on educational programs of the district. So it doesn't really say anything about the roles.
Well, we do kind of have a lobbyist we work with, Diane Smith, that, is it GMAC or GMAC? I can't remember that acronym.
I don't feel like she represents superintendents. I think it's a little different. I I don't know that I've ever seen anything on the board asking for our thoughts on the development of their agenda. And I know that they have an agenda. I don't know that we need a legislative liaison, I think is my point, and if we want to take action, we would talk about that and direct whatever action we want to do collectively.
I have just a few questions. I think it's a good idea to have a legislative liaison. I've been in groups before where we've had somebody come and report what the legislature is doing about the certain issue we were supporting. I don't think it could hurt. Now, this person you were talking about, is that a paid lobbyist?
Yes.
Okay, she's a paid lobbyist by the district or by superintendent's committees or?
Shar could explain it better than
Oh,
It's an annual fee based on a number of students in the district.
okay.
so she represents
about
multiple
30
districts.
districts.
Multiple counties then, right?
30, yeah, in their program.
So is this a person who goes down and checks out when bills are being passed about education and then reports back? Or lobbies also and reports back to us, hey, this is important to you. Well, and then, of course, Arizona State, their school boards association helps us out with that too.
And those things I think are separate. And yes, I mean, 'cause number one, I don't feel that WMAP represents the board. And I know the School Board Association pretends they represent the members of our member. I personally feel that it doesn't matter how I feel. I don't feel it's a good process. But nevertheless, I think if we're having a legislative liaison, I don't know, my opinions are it doesn't have to be a board member, but I would want it to be someone in our community who is representing us and not superintendents from other districts, not school boards across, but like what is Creighton? Like who? There's no voice for Creighton on there. There's zero voice. Scottsdale, Madison has a voice. And I don't know what they call that person, if it's just a lobbyist or a legislative liaison. So if we're going to do it, I think we should identify someone in the community that would either do it as volunteer and represent us, or we think carefully about what that is.
In the past, my understanding is that it's been, Matt, because of the work that he does, goes down there and comes back and usually, unfortunately, reports about all the horrible things that are going on down there. But it's not necessarily like a call to action saying, all right, this is our time, we need to start calling, if you're in this district or if you're in that district, call your representatives and let them know. So it's not necessarily like that, it's more just like, this is what's going on, we should know about it as school board members, but it's not, I mean, are you talking to representatives while you're down there about the issues that affect education? And is it because you have a personal relationship with them, or is it,
Yes, occasionally I do, but it's not something where I go down there and say, okay, what am I going to say for Creighton today? Because when I'm down there, usually I'm wearing another hat, but oftentimes I do. Certainly when I was at the legislative day that we had, the legislative conference for ASBA, that was an opportunity to talk to legislators, which was really something related to what we do in Creighton and as school board members. So I don't personally feel that there's, I think this has been me in the past, and basically it has just meant that I've given the legislative report, which I probably would have given whether you designated this anyway, and certainly other people, Mr. Zergoza had chimed in several times. I think other people asked questions, so certainly it could be anyone, it could be no one.
Yeah, because it's a liaison. It's not just someone to report. To me, it's like representing us to another entity. And if it's going to be someone who's down there like Mr. Jewett, which I don't necessarily have a problem with at all, it would just be a matter of like being aware and recognizing that it puts him in a situation where he has to wear different hats and he has to be very clear. And our legislators are not the most sophisticated folks. And I just would be, I don't know, I just think about that. And who we sending on there means something. And if we're not sending anyone, then we don't, I don't know.
first term on the board, I was a legislative liaison. At the same time, I had a similar situation with Matt where I had two hats. I was a lobbyist for a different organization, and then I had the legislative liaison hat. So how I handled it was whenever there was something I heard about the legislature that was being addressed that affects school boards, or schools, I'd make sure that the legislators that represented Creighton School District knew what was going on in Creighton related to that issue. So I would talk to Shar or whomever and gather more information and make sure it was sent to our representatives and senators in the legislature. So that could be an idea. I don't know if anyone did that before me or after me, but that's just what I did to try to keep them in the loop. And then I also encouraged them to come to our campuses, which they unfortunately never took me up on, but I invite them to different events in our district and give them opportunities to learn more about what's happening in our district and how the decisions they're making are affecting our district. But it was kind of hard to do with the two hats, and I had to be really careful about when I talked to them about what.
Yeah, well, so like, here's my experience at the
I think
legislature.
Annette had wanted to.
Okay.
I have done that before. I've been down to the legislature and been a volunteer lobbyist. I never got paid for it for certain issues. And right now, because I'm working full-time as a teacher, I don't have that. But in the future, maybe near future, maybe not so near future, you know, if time becomes available, I wouldn't mind doing that, going out and representing Creighton School District. I'm just saying, right now I can't because, you know, 7:30 before I'm somewhere else every day, Monday through Friday. So.
Well, the important things, the controversial things, they usually pass at 4 in the morning.
You're gonna come and sit with my kid.
So whoever it is, if we have one, like this is just my experience down at the legislature is, because I would sit in the education committee meetings, and then you have people who have like very like serious interest in these topics, and they're like, hey, I'm the president of this board, or I'm a board member here. And it was like no one ever really did a good job of clarifying this is me speaking on behalf of self or me speaking on behalf of my district. And the legislators would be very easily confused to think like, oh, this community feels this way or not. I know I took an interest and I would call other board members on their board and like, we've never even had a conversation about this topic. So I just would caution whomever it is that we send down there that we should talk about what the expectations are. How do you represent the board and the district? And I think before we have all that and we have some clear expectations, I don't know that we need one.
Well, is anyone interested in, to whatever degree, serving that role? I think we express some interest. I think as long, at the very least, I just like to know what's happening down there because I don't, or at least I would like to have someone that's making sure that we're all informed of, you know, what decisions they're making down there so that we can address them if we need to as a board.
And it can be something as simple as getting on the Google or Yahoo group that Janice Palmer has.
Yeah, there's something on the computer to look up at this point that would be no problem.
She sends really good summaries, sometimes like daily or every couple days during the session about what's happening down there. And sometimes I don't even have time to read those and break it down because sometimes they're kind of wonky. But I mean, if the legislative liaison could do that, I know personally it would help me do a better job as a board member. I think it might help other people.
So I think, am I hearing that perhaps Annette Sexton-Ruiz could be our legislative liaison? Don't worry, we won't fire you. This requires a motion, so it's up to the board whether someone wants to make a
I
motion.
move that Annette Sexton-Ruiz be appointed legislative liaison. I don't see the motion.
Oh, it's under recommended action. There you go.
I move the governing board approve the following recommendation regarding board representative. For legislative liaison, Annette Sexton-Ruiz.
And
So I don't know if we did the motion.
for
And for Arizona School Board Association Network Representative Tiffany Arenas.
okay, is there a second?
A second.
Thank you. All in favor? Is there any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. The next agenda item 12B is a report on the ASBA Legislative Workshop and Annual Conference that several of us attended. And although I placed this on the agenda, I of course left my notes somewhere else. So does anyone else have anything that they want to say about the December conference that was held at Biltmore? Anyone go to any particularly interesting sessions, learn anything?
The big takeaway that I had was communication, and specifically open and honest communication. There was a really great keynote speaker, Jim Bearden, I think was his name, and it was all about how to effectively communicate with others. And perhaps it's because my undergrad degree was in communications, and so I found that that whole kind of, the whole umbrella for the conference I felt was about open, honest communication. There was a specific one. Kyrene School District had talked about how they kind of put an end to the parking lot discussions that would take place in their district and started having these really frank and sometimes uncomfortable conversations in their board meetings that were open to the public, and how that really changed their relationship with each other and their ability to work collaboratively, but also their perception within the community. So that was one. And another one that I really enjoyed was all about energy savings and the fact that to reduce energy costs in school districts is usually just a matter of behavior change. And it was amazing to me how much just changing districts, and I feel like when I worked in Creighton School District, that was kind of already happening. I don't know, we were very diligent about getting refrigerators and microwaves out of the classroom and stuff like that first. And then the next step would be to perhaps look into solar panels and things like that. But it was, it's a whole, and you can do it all free on the Department of Energy's website and get your rating for your school. And I don't know if that's something that happened in the past, but I thought that was a really easy way to save money, because they were able to avoid a furlough day. This is Madison School District, and it was a lot of money, that furlough day, and they were able to save the money to avoid that furlough day. So those were the two that I really remembered. Oh, there was more. There's another one about student tracking folders and setting goals, and I just really, and it was, again, Kyrene School District, and they don't have the same kind of transiency within their schools where kids are moving around as much from school to school, but these folders would follow them from one grade to another, and they were able to set goals, and the results from this goal setting program was also kind of staggering. It was really good. I don't have the numbers with me either, but I remember being extremely impressed by what they had done there with goal setting and tracking and getting kids really invested in their education. Those are the three biggies that I remember.
And did you have anything that you wanted to?
Yeah, I went to several things, but one that impressed me that I thought someday I would like to look into a little bit more. I went to a presentation by a school district in Tucson, and the exact name escapes. It was Southern Tucson.
Sunnyside.
Yeah, Sunnyside. So they talked about how there was a school that was. I guess they had this really big building, and the enrollment was going down, and they ended up turning it into not only a preschool, but students came there infant to 5 years old, turned it into a big community building where parents came, parents worked, there was parent education, there was the child care, the daycare. A lot of it was funded, some of it was funded by federal and some by IDEA, because some of the kids had disabilities, but then some of it was actually funded by parents paying too, and the prices weren't very expensive what they were paying. So, but it turned out being financially an extremely successful program, and brought in a lot of money to the district. So I was impressed with that. in the same room afterwards, we were chatting a little bit. There was 2 other school board members from 2 other school boards in the Phoenix metro area, and they both said that they have sort of models for that. They both gave me their cards and invited me to come visit someday. So that's what I remember. And of course,
I only attended the legislative day. There was a very interesting presentation by a professor from ASU. I can't remember his name. David Garcia. Wow, you all do it, even though he is. Yeah. Yes, I understand. He had, and it was written up in the Arizona Capital Times about school choice and how it really, the concept we think of in terms of competition in the marketplace is of a coffee shop, that if I go to coffee shop A and their coffee is really horrible and across the street is coffee shop B, I'm going to leave, and so is everyone else. Coffee shop A, go to coffee shop B, and coffee shop A has to either improve their coffee or they're going to go out of business. And the net effect to the community is, from choice, is that you get better coffee in that neighborhood. Well, with schools, it doesn't really work that way, because most of the parents who leave failing schools anyway to go to other schools are really going to similar schools that are in similar situations, and that the situation really isn't one of us leaving coffee shop A, the way the model works in education or should work. It's rather than abandoning the coffee shop, we all get back there and say, let me show you how to make that coffee. And it's not quite right. And that's what works more in education, and that I know when we've looked at the performance of especially some of the charter schools around here that have similar demographics and are in a similar neighborhood, they perform worse than we do. So there's really hasn't been as much of an advantage. I thought that was interesting, but the other thing I found interesting were there was a presentation by the governor's education advisor on trying to do basically performance pay for school districts. And so it was, where would this money come from? They said, well, probably some of it would come from the existing funding formula.
It would all come from the existing.
Well, there's no other place for it to come from. So, and I think they were talking about something like $40 million a year initially. So hopefully they would have a very deliberative process. It's really sad that, when we're already as bare bones as we are, that they want to let us earn the money back that we don't have. So anyway, that was pretty much my takeaway. I thought that the education chairs and the ranking minority members had a good conversation, but as they said, the budget for education doesn't go through the education committee. It doesn't even go through an appropriations committee anymore. It just goes, it's negotiated by the governor, the speaker of the House, the Senate president, maybe a couple other people. But there's really not the committee process there used to be, and the input on our state's budget from all 90 of our legislators, it's really just among a handful of them. So that is it for.
So I'm going to say you might 4 years on the board in a couple months. That this has probably been the best report from an ASBA or NSBA conference. So I don't know if that is a reflection of them doing a better job, or board members taking more investment in the dollars that we spend to send board members there. So I really appreciate your reports. It sounds like you got a lot out of it, and I'm happy to hear that.
Great. Since that was informational, moving on to the legislative political report. I don't really have much to say. I don't know if anyone else does. I think we've heard about sequestration may be coming, the governor's state of the state, and the legislature begin at the beginning of next week, and by Friday of next week, the governor's budget will be out.
The question is, did I just hear, and I don't mean for us to stay any longer,
Yeah.
but did I hear correctly that there was a law passed, or maybe it was just a bill that was introduced about if somebody's injured on a school campus, people are no longer allowed to, and this may, I'm inundated with lots of information, but I think it was Arizona, where if somebody's injured on a school campus, and it's not related to school time, they can't sue the school.
Correct.
Okay.
And that was something that in my other hat that I helped push through the Children's Action Alliance, the American Heart Association, actually the School Boards Association, and the Arizona Risk Retention Trust, which insures schools. And the intent was to remove liability as being a barrier to opening up school grounds outside of the school day. And one of the reasons that the trial lawyers were willing to come on board was because it actually updated the definition of school activities, so it made clear that schools were liable for things like cheerleading, football, and things that were school-sponsored activities that took place outside of the school day, and that schools were liable for that time period when kids would normally come to school, as we would open up like half an hour before, so half an hour after when kids would be picked up. So it was a clarification of the law. It was probably already, it would have been interpreted that way, but that was a clarification to make schools outside of when school's in session to be more like school, city parks and things.
I'd like to add to this report. Appropriate
Sure.
At this point, Mr. President.
Sure.
Okay. So we alluded to it earlier, but I just wanted the board to be aware. There's three at least public proposals that I've heard as a response to school safety. The Attorney General Tom Horn has recommended, or he's going to, I guess, propose legislation that would arm one educator, maybe a principal or a teacher, that requires a change to the law. So that's something that's being discussed. He's trying to get as much national attention for this. So I want us to be aware of that and follow that. The sheriff is looking at arming volunteers, his volunteer posse, to roam our neighborhoods. And then finally, Representative Campbell, who is also just running for governor, is putting together what he calls a comprehensive bill or package to address this, which would include funding for more SROs. So I just wanted us to be aware of that as board members, to track that, and also consider like the way that state elected leaders approach this work is there's one policy solution and that's all there is to it. And I want us to think about what it is that they're proposing, how does this impact our community, and as a district come up with our own point of view and put that out there. On any, wherever that lands in the spectrum, I think that we advocate the best for our kids and we need to actually use that voice. So I just put that out there.
And I think you hit a good point that a lot of times when you represent a larger area, you're thinking of what a broader policy is. But for a lot of our schools, maybe I don't hear a lot of feedback about our SROs, but the feedback, for example, like what we heard tonight, is generally positive. But if we're in a limited budget situation and we're saying fund SROs versus funding capital, you may have some schools where the issue, some of our schools, we have student resource officers already. Maybe what we need is not additional funding for SROs, maybe we need the funding for, gates and locks and cameras or something, and I don't see that as being an option that's given to schools.
Yeah, I mean, especially that on this specific issue, we empower and we trust our school leaders to, first and foremost, be instructional leaders in their campus, but also make sure everything runs smoothly and protects our community. And as such, I think it's appropriate to ask them what they need, and as a board, commit to getting those resources. And it's not just like, oh, well, Representative Campbell or, oh, Attorney General Tom Horn says this is what you need, here you go.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be looking at that and look forward to more conversations on this.
Is there a way to put is this something tangible to put on a future agenda item, as an item, or just?
We could, if in the past we have done letters that represent a common, the feeling of the board we've done it to zoning for the city, we've done it to the legislature, we just did one to Congress regarding sequestration.
On the libraries.
Yeah, city council.
So I would say, like, we have this placeholder for every meeting, and so like we can have a report, we can take action on it. So if there's something that you like at a time that you think is appropriate that the board should talk about it, you just need to put in the yellow card and submit it to Hilda a couple days before the board meeting.
You know,
Then we can talk about what action we might take. But if it's not on the agenda, we can't do it.
I think if anything, the school safety issue, at least for me, and also coming from a teacher's perspective, has taught me that everybody needs to be really aware of needs of kids who may be classified as emotionally disturbed, and I know that I feel like our state has fallen short, in the recent, today is the 2-year anniversary, where, and I don't know, the specifics of that, but I do feel like there needs to be more done, and it all does kind of start with the schools, because that's usually the place where those kind of, whether it's a behavioral disability or emotional or academic disability, it usually, we're the ones to identify it. And so I think it's just good for everybody to be aware of, special needs of kids and, positive response to interventions, which we're already doing, instead of punitive response to intervention. So.
If there is no further discussion on the legislative political report, we have several future agenda items. I don't know if anyone wants to add any now.
Yes.
But I would like to also schedule, we have a number that are date to be determined, and I think we want to do that. The first one that is date to be determined, videotaping of board meetings, is something that, is it something we want to do? Probably February, February 5th is, how about that for videotaping board meetings? I think that there may be some things that the administration would like to bring to us. Data on teacher and student absenteeism, do we know when that might be? I suppose that's something that when it's available, you will bring it.
Are you looking for current? Are you looking for longitudinal?
I don't know. It's
Not sure what.
I don't have the yellow card. We'll think about that. That might be a good idea. Well, I think we can let that one go for now. The same with the discussion of experience with districts that have consolidated. The only person I really know of is Doris Goodale. She's a little busy right now. We'll wait until those last few days while they're negotiating the budget and she's not part of it. By her. Student conduct and weapons in school discussion, I had put that on there. I'm not ready for that yet. Dancing classroom presentation, I don't know if that's...
It can wait. I need to talk to them again.
Okay, and then the long-term plans for the foreign language immersion program. I think that's something that would probably go well on a board study session. I don't know what others think of that idea for February.
So I totally agree. I think it gives us more flexibility in the way we discuss the topics. And being that we have time on February 9th, I think that would be a study session. We should talk about that.
Okay.
For February 9th.
Okay.
Study session.
So we have scheduled videotaping of board meetings for February 5th and the long-term plans for foreign language immersion for the February 9th board study session.
And I'd like, for January 22nd, I would like to add a board agenda item on the establishment of an advisory committee for solar exploration.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Great. So I think we've got that covered.
And Mr. Jewett, I'd like to have a discussion before I get off the board, so maybe in March. I'd like to for the board to learn more about the tripod surveys. I think that's just what they're called. I don't know why. And see how those align or not align to the surveys that we use for students and parents. The research I guess I can't go into it right now, but
Yeah.
I'd like to talk about that in March.
Okay.
Tripod surveys.
There is the yellow card for you to fill out. Any other agenda items? If not, I will entertain a motion that I usually make.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.